So tonight was the first Democratic presidential debate, and we got to see 10 candidates on a stage for 2 hours, each trying to make a name for themselves and have a breakthrough moment. It was tough because having 10 people on a stage, they only had a few minutes each to respond to questions, and there were just so many of them.
Tonight, round one.
Here are some highlights from last night's NBC debate. I mean, Elizabeth Warren came into this event with a lot of momentum, and she pretty much had an error-free night. She made her message she presented her message to the supporters. She got some really solid responses. She spoke about her many, many plans, and she leaves the night as in good position as when she started it.
I want to return government to the people, and that means calling out the names of the monopolists and saying I have the courage to go after them. Thank you.
I think people were looking at some of the lesser-known candidates, such as Cory Booker or Julian Castro or Beto O'Rourke, candidates who are they're sort of known on the national stage, but they're not polling very well, to see if they would have any sort of breakthrough moment. And it seems like Castro really did seem to. He had a couple of answers that really landed really well with the crowd, and he seemed to have some buzz about him tonight. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next with him in the polls.
I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice. And what that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose.
Beto O'Rourke, I think people expected him to be sort of like a master debater because he debated Ted Cruz in the Texas Senate race, and Ted Cruz is quite the debater, so he had a lot of practice. But he didn't seem to make as much of a mark as I think people expected him to tonight. Cory Booker seemed to have a good night. Overall, I think just because there's so many candidates in such little time, nobody had one of those zingers or one of those breakthrough moments like we saw in the 2016 campaign with Donald Trump. Speaking of Donald Trump, he was really not as much of a factor in this debate as I expected. I expected the candidates to pretty much constantly talk about him and to use him as a foil. And yeah, they mentioned him, and a couple of them had some slaps against him, but he really did not dominate this debate. And the other person who it's interesting wasn't mentioned at all was Barack Obama, which is the last Democratic president, super popular among Democrats. I was surprised that nobody really tried to claim his legacy or to link their policies with his. So for voters who are just tuning in, it's kind of hard to really know any of these candidates because there were so many of them on the stage, and there's so few minutes to talk. But one thing we did see was sort of the candidates breaking into two separate camps. For the Democratic Party, you have the most liberal wing and the most progressive wing, which Elizabeth Warren is obviously a leader of that wing, and then you have a more moderate wing, which somebody like Joe Biden, would fill that category. And you saw the candidates sort of self-sort on issues such as healthcare, on immigration, on guns. You saw a little bit of separation on the issues if you're paying attention. So those are something that I think we're really going to see a lot more of on the campaign trail as these candidates all try to differentiate themselves from one another. I just mentioned Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders is obviously the other front runner in the race, and the two of them didn't really get mentioned either. So I was surprised there wasn't more attacking of the front runners. Elizabeth Warren didn't really have any slings or arrows thrown at her. There was a couple of disputes and a couple of debates, but there wasn't a real attacking of the front runners that I was wondering if the candidates would try to do to try to sort of break through and have a moment. The other thing we saw was a lot of discussion about the party and the heartland, like the Midwest, the Rust Belt, and why the party in recent years is sort of not doing as well there as they once did. And a couple of the candidates, especially Bill de Blasio and John Delaney, they repeatedly sort of painted the party as moving, as being perceived as too coastal, too elite, too Ivy League, as losing its connection with working people. That was sort of an interesting thing because I don't think like in 2012 or 2008, I don't think those were issues that Democrats were really discussing, although they were doing a little bit better in those parts of the country than they did in the most recent election. So we get to see 10 more of these candidates tomorrow night.